Happy Sunday, happy Sunday, happy Victory Sunday. It's the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. For all your betting needs, go to betonline.ag, put in promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, and get a 50% welcome bonus. Also, if you're into fantasy and you want to take it to the ultimate level, go to Underdog Fantasy, the app or the website, put in USC LAFB and get $100 match. It is Victory Sunday, and we have the three of the tripod here. One tripod is barely awake. One has a big smile ear to ear, and it looks like he's growing the beard back.
You know it, Coach. Well, we're 2/3 of the way from no longer being called the Bearded Bandits, because remember what we said preseason: if SC goes 3-0,
at risk,
Ryan's got to be clean shaven, and that's starting to look very likely.
It's starting to look very likely. How are you doing, man? How's it going?
Doing well, doing great, Coach. Always excited to recap this with you guys. What a great game it was last night, and excited to jump into it at the stroke of midnight. Things just about wrapped up at the Coliseum, but what a great time to celebrate. Really, really historic day for a lot of reasons.
Right eye, barely awake, barely moving. How are you doing?
Great. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go bald face, I know, because it's going to look silly, but it is time to shave this. So we need to get to this 3-0 start so I can trim this thing up, because it is getting a little out of
No. We talked about the beautiful face. The beautiful face.
No, it is going bald. I'm just saying I don't want to go bald, but it will be going bald. I'm just saying regardless, it needs a trim. But no, I'm great. Happy to be here. Jamal, before you jumped on, I was telling Al, I literally left Vegas after the game last week. And I got home 45 minutes later than I did last night with the game in LA, because of how late it was. I got home at 2:30 last night, but what a game, what an atmosphere. So happy to be doing our Victory Sunday again. Glad we're back.
So there's one thing I really enjoyed about last night. I love the new intro. So on Big Ten Network, they showed the new intro with them coming out onto the field. And I loved that. I was like, all right, this is great. And their whole thing on the Big Ten Network was bringing Hollywood to the Big Ten. Like, that was like, they kept saying that, like, bringing Hollywood to the Big Ten, and I enjoyed it. And the bell was back. I heard the bell. There was a little bit more emphasis on the bell, Ryan. I don't know, like from TV, there was a little bit more emphasis on the third down bell. It looks like the bell is back, so our push is coming. But neither here nor there. The number 13 Trojans home debut at the Coliseum for the 2024 season wins 41-0 and a very dominant
+7, Coach. +7. 48-0.
Oh, it's 48. I turned it off at 41. So all right, so 48-0 in a very dominant performance. Very dominant performance. It was very impressive. I am thoroughly convinced that Lincoln Riley watches our podcast. Thoroughly convinced, because I put something on there last week about how if they show this look, if they run this play, it's going to hit. And they showed the look and they ran the exact play. I'm thoroughly convinced. Like, I mean, they probably got it from that film, but it's crazy how much stuff we talk about and it shows up. But let's get into the game. Miller Moss, very impressive. Very impressive. But welcome to LA, Woody Marks. Welcome to LA, Quentin Joyner. Lincoln Riley ran the ball last night. At one point, I looked and they had 20 carries, and I think that was at the first half. I'm going to check it out real quick right now. And I think they had over 200 yards rushing, if I'm not mistaken, and that's unlikely for – I think the last time we saw that was that P-Ron that broke the record? Was that Lincoln Riley's team who had P-Ron that broke that record? I'm not sure. Don't judge me. I'm sorry if I don't get that right. But the fact that Lincoln Riley ran the ball was crazy. Woody Marks had 103. Quentin Jr. had 84. Bryson Jackson, 7 rushes for 34 yards. Amari Peterson, the true freshman, 3 rushes for 18. A total of 253 yards on the ground last night by Lincoln Riley's offense. Who said he only wants to throw the ball, right? Miller Moss, impressive performance, 29 for 41, 295. Total of 500 yards, total offense. I'll kick it to you guys, and then we'll go to some comments. Ryan, you were there. What was the atmosphere like, and what do you have to say about last night's game?
Yeah, I thought the atmosphere was good for 8 o'clock, 100-degree Utah State matchup. I think it was like almost 70,000, 69,000, I think was the attendance. So I thought it was good. It was, people were hyped up. Obviously, we talked about it last week and we talked about on Thursday, Coach, that this is the most excited I've seen this town about this team in quite some time, even including that 11-win first year with Lincoln. So I thought it was a good atmosphere. No YMCA in the fourth quarter.
Yes, they got rid of it.
No YMCA.
Shout out to Nico.
Yeah, so they played yourself instead at the start of the fourth. So I think people were hyped about that, but no, it was good. But for me, and we'll get all into it. But for me, this was, I thought the offense, had some mistakes here and there. Obviously, 2 drop touchdowns, one from Jacoby Lane, one from Zachariah Branch. You still put 48 points on the board, even with the backups in, got in the end zone. So a good performance, things to clean up. But for me, this was all about the defense. And, anytime you get a shutout, first one since 2011, give up less than 200 yards. I don't care who you're playing. If you're playing an FBF school, that's impressive to me. And, and I think they can still get better, but just sound defense. The reserves were in halfway through the third quarter, still shut out. Cameron Fountain got in on the action. A lot of the backups looked, I thought, great, and the young kids. So, for me, this was just another building block for this defense. Again, Utah State, I know it's not the best barometer, but this is what USC should have done to a team like Utah State, but this is not what they would have done the last 2 years. So definitely a good building block.
100%. Man, what are your thoughts for last night?
Yeah, I walked away with a few takeaways. I thought there were kind of 3 areas of emphasis for this game, sort of going in and wrote a piece about that. The first for me was all about the running game. And Coach, you said it. There was an emphasis on the run, which was really great to see. 253 yards total on the ground. Came out of the gate, right? The first 2 drives were 131 yards rushing. Woody had 13 for 103 and a touchdown, and he was done at halftime. Joyner was 10 for 84 with 2 touchdowns, and it was kind of the lead back there in the second half before we went into the third string. So the emphasis on the running game was very clear, and Lincoln even talked about that at halftime and at the end of the game as well. So that was sort of job one, I think A+ there. And then second, I think from a defensive standpoint, Ryan said it best. Holding a team to 190 yards, a shutout, sort of poetic that the shutout was with Matt Barkley leading the team out, because obviously the athletic department said the last time USC had a shutout was 2011. It was the 50-0 game against UCLA, and Matt Barkley was the quarterback of that game. And so, sort of an end-to-end symbolism there. And then I think there's, as well as the defense played, I think it can get even better, which is, I think, the scary part of this whole situation. I think, 2 areas that I was sort of really looking at going into this game defensively. One was pass rush. I thought the pass rush was terrific in week 1, but it was, no sacks. So that sort of brought up some items. I think, again, no sacks in the first half, but they did a great job blitzing on third down, second and long, when they needed to, and was very effective with the pressures. And that first drive of the second half with Utah State, got the 2 sacks in 3 plays. Gentry got a sack, and then Kamari Ramsey came down and got a sack to essentially kind of end that game. The game was always kind of over, but that sort of ended the game. So I think there can be sort of more to be done on kind of consistent pass rush moving forward, but they were terrific. Anthony Lucas was also terrific in that game with his activity, as was, of course, the linebacking duo of Gentry and Mascarenas Arnold, and then Ramsey had another terrific game. And then I was looking for the secondary, that LSU game at the start, a lot of soft zone, was looking for sort of more competitiveness. I think the secondary wasn't really challenged much last night, so I think they did a great job. What really stood out to me was the short tackling and the open field tackling, those sort of balls in the flat, those 3-yard out routes, those 6-yard digs, where there's some space. All Utah State wanted to do was kind of get the ball out to some playmakers and try and make a move. Very short tackling there. So very excited to see all of that. I thought it was sort of an A+ of the running game. I thought the pass rush was a B. I think we can get to another level, but they were absolutely sensational as well. And then I think the secondary was about an A-. And so I think, really very little to sort of walk away from saying this is not a legitimate playoff contender. And just sort of to close out my opening thoughts, just from a macro level, we thought yesterday was going to be kind of a snoozer of a weekend, outside of that Texas-Michigan game, I knew Texas was going to come in and smash Michigan. Michigan just does not have any semblance of offense right now or verticality. So you see Michigan kind of get smashed and really get owned on both lines. And then NIU coming into South Bend, baby, beating Notre Dame. I mean, that was absolutely phenomenal. And again, Notre Dame was outgained by 102 yards to NIU in that ball game. So that wasn't some just fluke game. I mean, they really kind of got owned offensively, defensively, even in the trenches from time to time. And then you saw Penn State after that really impressive performance on the road against West Virginia really kind of struggle against Bowling Green. That was a 27-24 game with 4.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and Bowling Green had the ball. I mean, anything could have happened at that point. So you sort of walk away saying, we thought we were going to have these sort of 4 marquee games. Did we already play our toughest game of the season last week? And is USC going to be favored the rest of the way throughout the regular season? So all in all, to say, great performance defensively. And I think the sky is the limit on the hype train right now. When you look at the rest of the schedule, this should be an expectation of a playoff berth this year. And it's really exciting to see once again.
So there's a couple of things I'd take away from yesterday's game, and let's compare and contrast, right? So if this was last year, if this was a year ago, and I know we don't want to live in the past, but this was a year ago, we win that game 48-20, just any number 48-20. It would have not been a dominant performance by the defense, just scheme wise. We're not taking anything from the athleticism, because we've seen the athleticism from them dudes last night. We know how athletic they are, and we know how good they are, and we know how good they could be. But the just defenses schematically, it was not been good enough. Here's another thing. Last night, they threw the ball into the flats, and I saw so much textbook inside foot, splitting the hip, make everything go back inside. At one point, it was so good. Number 14. Who's number 14, Ryan, on defense?
Jacoby Covington.
Jacoby Covington. They threw it to the fat inside hook. They did a replay, and my 11-year-old coach was watching. I was like, "That's textbook." I rewound it 5 times. I wanted to put something on the Twitter, but I was so hyped that they did that so textbook and so perfect. There's nobody getting. There's some missed tackles every now and then, and people are human. We're going to see it in an hour. Pros missing tackles. That's fine. But the way the missed tackles are going down is amazing. Mascarenas Arnold playing linebacker at number 4. He is a dude. He's way better than Shane Lee in this scheme. And I'm not taking anything from Shane Lee, because I feel like if Shane Lee played in this scheme, Shane Lee would be really good. But Shane Lee played in a scheme where he was out in space, and he's not an out in space dude. Gentry's level of play is either two things. He's put in a better situation, what I think a lot of these dudes are, or the game is finally slowing down to him. I think it's the latter, and I think that he's in a way better situation. He's flying around. Gentry's game is elevated so much, and he's playing way better football from last night to today. Now, here's another thing. Jamal, you mentioned in our LSU pregame show that SC is a team that will fly under the radar. I don't think SC's flying under the radar anymore. They had a big win last Sunday. They were dominant yesterday, and then we'll go to this. So last night, this dude disappeared. I was talking to him all day, and all of a sudden he just disappeared, and there was no more comments from him. Then I get a text from Ryan saying, "Do you see the Oregon score?" And it was 20-20, and all of a sudden he comes out talking more. He started talking stuff about SC like, "Hey, you worrying about the wrong thing, bro. Like, you need to worry about why your team is struggling against a Mountain West team, and you're supposedly the number 8 team in the nation. We're going to be in the top 10 tomorrow morning, right? I don't know if it's going to be 10 or 9, but we're going to be in the top 10 of them. There's enough stuff that failed for us to be in the top 10. Now, we're no longer flying under the radar, but the performance that they put on last night, the performance that they put on Sunday, able to make stops, we're a top 10 team. Now, how good we are of a top 10 team, that still remains to be the question. But that's a very good place to be, knowing at this point in where we are, we're considered a top 10 team. We get a break. We get Mason Cobb back. Everybody gets rest and refreshed. We'll get on the plane on Thursday. And 2 Thursdays from now, we'll head to Ann Arbor and face a bigger game. Cliffhanger, we'll talk about it tomorrow. And Jamal, you kind of said it, but Are we good enough to beat Ohio State? Because it's looking like right now, very early prediction, like they do at the next day after the national championship, very early prediction. Oh, here's a very early rankings for next season. Very early prediction. I'm not saying this, I'm just saying, but right now it's looking like SC Ohio State Big Ten championship. I don't see anybody that is better than USC and Ohio State in the Big Ten right now. Don't see it. Now, Penn State's going to be a hell of a game. Notre Dame's going to be a hell of a game. USC is going to be a hell of a game. Michigan's going to be a hell of a game just because of the matchup and all the glamour they're going to put around it. Two Titans going, and we're going to get that. But when it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes, I think our Jimmies is a little better than everybody else's Joes in the Big Ten. The only one I have a question with is Ohio State. Brian, you got a comment to that? And then Jamal, you could go after.
Yeah, well, I think working backwards to the Jimmy's talk, because that was the big, I think, talk in the offseason, not just by us, but nationally, was, all right, we know this scheme is going to be better. We know this coaching staff looks good, but most people thought that USC just didn't have the talent yet. It was going to be a year or two kind of, improving, which, I still think it's probably a year from being back to like an elite defense. We'll see more when we see better competition, I guess. But I think it's been so impressive, the quick transformation. And I think the talent that some of these guys have displayed, especially when these transfers, I mean, Kamari Ramsey looks like one of the best safeties in football, which we know he was last year. I mean, he was fantastic at UCLA and he was one of the prize transfer portal gets. So that wasn't a huge surprise, but you see Nate Clifton, how good he's looked as a talent acquisition from Vanderbilt. You mentioned already Easton Mascarenas-Arnold. I mean, how good he was at Oregon State, but he's looked even better now being in this scheme. And he said last night in his presser, this is the most fun he's had playing football in a long time. So I think the talent that is actually on this roster is a lot better than a lot of people thought it would be. And then obviously schematically, connectivity is one of the best in college football, and that's why they're playing so well. Just going back to the tackling, 5 missed tackles. I mean, that's pretty good for an overall 60-minute game. I don't care.
That's
who you
hella
play.
good.
Yeah, and anytime you're in that single digits, especially under 6, I think you're in a really good spot. And in the open field, they look tremendous yet again. And so, yeah, I just think it's really great. It's funny looking at the schedule. Like through 2 weeks, is Nebraska the toughest opponent right now looking like? I mean, Nebraska, obviously Colorado is not a good football team. I think that's pretty obvious, but Nebraska actually might be a pretty feisty team coming to the Collies. So Penn State's going to get better. Michigan's in the big house. Notre Dame's always going to be a rivalry. UCLA is always going to be a rivalry, but Nebraska might be like one of those testy teams now that we weren't really expecting maybe going into the year.
Yeah, no, Ryan. I mean, I Coach, I'm totally with you. And just to clarify, I didn't say we were flying under the radar. I said the first game, it's nice to fly under the radar if you had the choice between being 13th and being 23rd, right? That was the conversation. We're certainly not under the radar right now. I mean, there's no question about that. And I think moving forward, look, I mean, I think what's so exciting is we had kind of talked about this equation in the offseason, and we had said, look, I mean, all the defense really needs to be is sort of a B defense. I mean, as long as it's sort of top 40, top 50, which I think it's certainly going to clear that. I mean, this is, I think, going to be a bona fide top 30 defense, potentially top 40, that all you need is that when you couple it with a Lincoln Riley offense. And so that is going to project you into total national title contention. I mean, I think we saw it, the blueprint last year with the University of Washington, with Penix and all those receivers and that incredible offense. And they were opportunistic. They were disciplined enough to be able to set their offense up for success. And so when you're looking forward here, I think that the talent, certainly there's been an upgrade. Obviously, so much has been discussed in terms of the weight gain and the muscle gain and all of those things. I think that's really translating on the field. But I don't know if talent-wise, this team has sort of necessarily transformed from last year. I think, to Ryan's point, we got a couple of really nice gets, Ramsey and Mascarenas-Arnold in particular. But this comes back to scheme. This comes back to the genius of D'Anton Lynn. I mean, I think that the person that really deserves the lion's share of the credit here is D'Anton Lynn. And, it was interesting because in the offseason, so much of the conversation was around Coach Henny because everything was around recruiting, right? We got to get these guys. And a lot of that was for 25 and beyond. And Lynn was flying under the radar from a media perspective after being hired because I think he was in the lab and getting his scheme ready. I mean, it just goes to show the genius of this guy and just the way coach he sort of approaches the defense. There's different zone concepts on the back end. He disguises things, with the front six, the front seven in such unique ways. I mean, that, Gentry was kind of coming off of curls, to sort of attack the quarterback. I mean, there were moments where you thought Jameel Muhammad was going to sort of come off the edge. He retreats, Gentry comes in, vice versa. He just does such a phenomenal job of disguising his pressure and then playing kind of that zone shell. And like coaches have said for a number of months and over a year now, you just feel like there's always one more guy anywhere you go with the ball. And so, Coach, we talk a lot about the window, right? And I think we're in the window right now. I mean, I think we're in the window. And the reason I say that, Lincoln is going to be Lincoln. I don't think we're going to have D'Anton Lynn very long. I mean, if there's going to be more games like this, he might be gone after this year and probably will be gone after next year. And so, and as great as sort of the pipeline of coaches is, the D'Anton Lynns don't grow on trees. That's why they're D'Anton Lynns. So I think we're officially in the window of opportunity here, and it happens very quickly in college football. And to your guys' point, look, I think it's very fair to say that it's Ohio State is probably the most talented team in this conference, and USC is probably the second best team right now in the Big Ten. I think when you look exactly as you guys described, you have to be able to kind of score with USC. You're not with the Lincoln Riley system. You're not going to be able to win a game 13-10. And so when you look at Michigan, when you look at some of these other Big Ten teams, can they just score enough? I mean, they can be playing great defense, but ultimately, it's going to break for you. I mean, look at what happened to Iowa yesterday. They pitched a shutout the first half of the game, and they lost. Because they couldn't score enough to kind of give a margin for error. So I'm with you. I think that they're going to be sort of favored here. I don't think Michigan is going to be the game that everyone thinks it's going to be. They have a long way to go to improve here. And I think, look at what happened to Oregon. My God. I mean, Oregon had 2 special teams touchdowns were their last 2 touchdowns to sort of stave off Boise State. And I'll be honest with you, that last guy, he dropped the ball before the line. Okay, there was some home cooking there.
No, the Oregon dude picked it up in the end zone. One of his teammates picked it up in the end zone.
But still, it just Oregon was very lucky to win that game. Now they're loaded with talent. You got to assume they're going to kind of get things going. I think Penn State will get things going as well. But I'm kind of with you, Ryan. USC is probably going to be favored in every game from here on out. I think you like Wisconsin, obviously with Raiola, Patrick Mahomes' cousin. I kind of sneaky game for me. Fans might kill me for this. I think it might be Wisconsin. And I think they're balanced, they're disciplined. I just think the familiarity with Grinch, as bad as Grinch is, just knowing Lincoln for 8 or 9 years, I think that's just going to be sort of a weird matchup. It's sort of the Charles Barkley, Popeye Jones matchup, that Barkley would always say. So, but that's all to say. I think the sky's the limit here. And I think we're firmly in the window of opportunity because D'Anton Lynn is not going to be here very long because this guy is one of the most special minds in all of football.
I will tell you this, if D'Anton Lynn leaves, all Lincoln Riley has to do is make a call to Utah State and grab their head coach because that dude
he's a good coach.
He does some good stuff schematically. There's some stuff that's questionable that needs to be fixed, but he has some schematic stuff that's like, oh, that's really good. Like, I get where he's coming from, so he needs to change it a little bit. But let's roll into these questions. Here goes a good question right here. This team is starting to resemble Pete Carroll's team in defense and offense. Love this win. Fight on. Is this team. So that's big shoes to fill. Being that I played on a couple Pete Carroll's teams, that's big shoes to fill. I like to play it like this. And it's kind of like the LeBron, Kobe, Michael Jordan conversation. There will never be another Michael Jordan. There'll never be another Kobe Bryant. There'll never be another LeBron James. Well, I'd say Magic Johnson and LeBron James are the same, but there'll never be another LeBron James. I don't think there'll never be another Pete Carroll era, right? Like, put it like this, Alabama. Paul Bear Bryant had his era, Nick Saban. Those two are never compared. And I'd like to put it along the line of that. Like, if Lincoln Riley does what he has to do, this will be his own era, his own identity. I do like the fact that he brought Pete Carroll around. I think that's closing the loop, that Pete Carroll's starting to come around again. And I also do like the fact that he's starting to embrace the Hollywood aspect. I think those are the things that help USC become USC, and that was what helped USC with the Carroll era. So embracing the Hollywood aspect, bringing Coach Carroll around, asking him and picking his brain works very, very well. So I don't think he's gonna be like Coach Carroll's team, but I think there's ability there for the success that Coach Carroll had. Ryan, Jamal, you guys got anything on that one?
Yeah, I mean, certainly this is the closest it's felt to at least having that semblance of just I don't know if dominance is a word we should even start using yet, but at least through 2 games, it's looked like that. And I think when you look at the adaptation that he's had from last year to this year, I mean, you said it all, Coach. Besides, I don't want to rehash everything, but with the coaching hires, the recruiting tactics, the NIL updates and changes, but then, yeah, with kind of embracing the LA image, because we talked about that a year ago. It's like, okay, this isn't Oklahoma anymore. Like, Lincoln Riley's going to have to adapt to what LA is if he's going to want to succeed. That doesn't mean he needs to be Pete Carroll. That doesn't mean he has to have open practices with Snoop Dogg and every celebrity and fans there. But it does help to kind of embrace what this town has to offer. And it seems like this year he fully has. And I mean, since he's been here, there's been celebrities on the sidelines. But again, last night you get Dwayne Wade, Aaron Donald, all these different celebrities showing up, and USC's not just embracing them, but like putting them out in the world. Like, look who's here at our games, for recruits in the world to see. And last night, we haven't even talked about this yet, but it was a huge recruiting night as well. Tons of top recruits at the game, able to see that atmosphere, see the dominance of this team. And when you look at players like Julian Lewis and defensive players like Elijah, the defensive tackle from Georgia, and obviously, and they're looking at teams like Auburn, who just lost to Cal, Colorado just got smoked by Nebraska. USC is the place to be. I mean, they're winning, the culture's better, the town is great, the city's getting behind it. So in that regard, Lincoln Riley's checking all these boxes off, and this team is doing it. Now they got to keep going. You're 2 games in, and you got your Big Ten slate now coming up. But this is what we as a panel, and then obviously the entire fan base, have been wanting to kind of see matriculate since he came here. And I think we're definitely seeing it, which is really exciting. I think why, talking about this team is really fun right now compared to think of where we just were 7 months ago, after that UCLA game. Like, whoa. Like, what is happening? Like, what is going on with this program? Is Lincoln Riley on the hot seat? And now where we are 7 months from now is like, all right, still work to do. You can't call it a success after 2 games, but this is what was expected to be built. And it certainly looks like it's heading the right way that fans are really, really excited about.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels the closest to what it was with Pete. The last great USC season with Pete, I've always said, was 2008. And if you look at from 2008 to now, there were a couple of flashes. We obviously had the Darnold year where we won the Rose Bowl, but everyone forgets we started that year 1-3, lost to Alabama by 46. And obviously there was sort of a turnaround final 8 games in a row. But, when you start a season 1-3 and you get smoked, it's really hard to kind of pick yourself back up from a fan base perspective, from a juice perspective, from a hype perspective, to then kind of bring it back. And then there was a lot of hype the year after, and the team never really sort of materialized. Early loss at the Palouse to Washington State, that kind of deflated, I think, a lot of energy that year, and then went moving forward. And I think 2 years ago, I think it was sort of refreshing that they were winning, but we all knew it was sort of how, smoke and mirrors there. I mean, it was just, you can't get 5 turnovers every game and win by 8. It just didn't look like a team that was truly great and ultimately got exposed. So I think just from an on the field product, this is the best this team has looked. It's a very small sample size, but since Pete Carroll, for a number of reasons. One is you have a very dynamic head coach. Around that head coach, you have young, innovative coordinators. And then around those young, innovative coordinators, you have built a culture of competition. One of the things that we're starting to take away is that wide receiver room is so deep, but they enjoy competing with one another. They enjoy uplifting one another. Look, that defensive front 7, pretty deep. They enjoy feeding off of one another and uplifting one another. So when you've got a dynamic head coach, you've got innovative, young, hungry coordinators, and then you have a culture of competition around that. I think those are the 3 ingredients that if you were to sort of codify what was the Pete Carroll era, it was those three things. And this is the first time that all three of those things seemed to be present at the same time. There were moments where you had one thing or moments where you had two things, but you never had it all together in this particular way. And then when you have those three things, then the sparkles and the glitter and the glamour comes, because Dwayne Wade and Aaron Donald are not going to come on the sideline of an 8-5 team, right? You got to be able to have those things, and then everybody shows up. And so, look, we're on the cusp of something. I think we're back in a window here, guys. I mean, we've got a 2-year window to make some noise.
The thing is, we need to turn the window to at least into eternity. So, like last night, Nick Saban, I didn't realize it, but he was there for 17 years. And the first thing I thought in my mind was like, bro, you should have just stuck it out for 3 to get your 20 in. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're finishing a round number, but like Nick Saban was there for 17 years. I don't know if we'll have Lincoln Riley for 17 years, because he's stated that before, like he doesn't plan on doing this forever. But, and I talk about this all the time. Hopefully we get to a point to where Lincoln Riley sets a foundation to where the next person that comes in is somebody off of his staff, and it just keeps rolling. That's what I'm hoping. And then we get 17 years worth of something like this, and maybe 20 years or something worth like this. And it's just impressive. Another thing I want to talk about was the pass game is going to be incredible, right? And last night, a lot of people was like, oh, there's a lot of misses by Miller Moss and things like that. That's going to take care of itself. The timing just isn't there yet, right? And that is something that's going to fix over time, and the timing is going to end up being there. Once the timing is there, Miller Moss is going to be dangerous. You know what I mean? And that with that receiving core, I think the offense is such a big weapon now that you can run the ball. But next week will be his biggest test. Not next week, in 2 weeks. I'm sorry. In 2 weeks will be his biggest test, and this is going to be the first battle test that they're going to have. And we'll talk about this in 2 weeks. But can they withstand adversity? There's going to be some adversity. Yes, they've dealt with adversity first week of the season. Can they deal with lead shifts? Yes, they dealt with lead shifts. Is the quarterback and the coordinators posed enough when they're in a close game to deal with something like this? They've already been tested through something like that. You know what I mean? Not at home, outnumbered crowd-wise. Now they're going to the big house, and this is going to be a huge thing. I said this before. I think if we look at last year and look at this year, and I know you guys remember this, we gave him a list of stuff that he needs to work on. We're like his teacher. You need to work on this, and this. And that's why I feel like he watches his podcast. He checked every single box that we said that he needs to work on. Media, he's a lot better. He's not saying things in the media like that will come back and get him. He did a lot better with recruiting. He did a lot better with coaching. He's starting to recruit the LA area heavy. You know what I mean? Like, I know he's still out of state, but recruiting has changed a little bit, and there's a national brand. But it looks like he's starting to build a wall around Southern California a little bit now with that 2026 class. Like, there's a lot of things that Lincoln Riley approved on, and I think he just has some reflection, and that reflection worked. And that is a sign of a great coach. What can I do to make this better? What can I do to fix this? And I think he's doing those things to fix it, and we're starting to see it. And we're at a point now. Check this out. If this was a year ago, we'll be like, all right, we're going to Michigan. Which tile is going to fall first? Who's going to score last? Now we're going to Michigan. Like, I feel really confident about going to this Michigan game. You know what I mean? Even if Michigan lost to Texas, if this was a year ago, we'll be like, all right, we got to still outscore them. You know what I mean? Now we're saying, oh, we're really confident about going to this Michigan game. I'm not as worried as I was before going to the Michigan game, even with the stuff we know now. Their defensive front isn't that good. They're a little questionable on defense now because they run a lot of man. They don't have a quarterback. The only one we're really worried about going to Michigan is Edwards. But a year ago, even if Edwards was still the problem, we'll still have our doubts. So now we have very little doubt. That's such a big change within a year of football and an offseason that sparks that and keeps that window open a little bit longer. You know what I mean, Jamal? It like totally. We're in that window, but it's the supports on the windows. Like, all right, we got a chance to accomplish this. So that's what I'm saying.
Coach. I mean, I think it's really well said. I think we all want that window. I think modern college football, I think Saban is sort of an outlier. I mean, to basically play for a national championship every other year for 17 years is kind of ridiculous. I think the window here look, Clemson had a 6-year window. Pete had a 7-year window. You start going around. Like, I think that's about right. You're trying to build for a 5, 6, 7-year window. I just think that the brilliance of D'Anton Lynn is only going to be 1 or 2 years. So you really got to kind of nail it here in my mind. Coach, I want to push back a little bit on something you said. I thought the passing game was fine last night. I thought Miller Moss was fine. Really good. I think a lot was made of the drops. There were sort of 3 moments there. Obviously, Jacoby just, there was an eagerness. That was a really nice out and in route. I mean, that was really phenomenal. And he just wanted to kind of turn and score. And it just popped out. And then same thing happened with Branch. It was just a ball in the flats. He wanted to make a move before he could catch it. So I think that was just some eagerness there of guys who wanted to score. Part of it is because this wide receiving group is so deep that, when you do get your number called, you definitely want to get into the end zone. So I don't really see that as like a systemic challenge. I think that those are just kind of a couple fluky things. In the case of Lane, obviously it cost us 4 points. But in the case of Branch's drop, I mean, Joyner ran it in the very next play. I thought the Lake McCree fumble was also a little bit of an anomaly because, he sort of caught that ball, and then reversed the field. And then he lost sight of the backside guy and he was trying to make a move on the right and then got stripped, So obviously there's some care there. But I think overall, a lot was being said about the drops. I mean, you want to be clean sheet every time you step on the field, but that's not always realistic. And I don't think that was necessarily a systemic issue. I think that the team made a very conscious effort to want to be able to run the ball and essentially kind of go play action. And Miller didn't really take a ton of shots. He had a few, but it was really a lot of underneath stuff. And the one thing I'll say is the strength of the Utah State team was their secondary. They made some phenomenal plays out there. There was that one ball to Lemon where their star player number 6, he just the way he deflected that ball. I mean, that was an NFL caliber play there. They did some really nice things on the goal line. So I think Miller was surgical last night. I think he was just kind of taking what the defense gave them and recognized that the strength of that team was really more on the back end. I think Utah State also played a lot of too high, over the course of the first half of that game. So Miller's got no problem kind of dinking and dunking there, and Lake McCree kind of coming through as well. I mean, who would have thought through 2 games the leading receiver on this team would be Lake McCree by a lot, in terms of receiving yards. So I think he's passing it around all over the place. And I actually thought the play of the game last night in terms of the highlight was actually Miller kind of rolling out, sort of looking near side and that wheel route to Woody Marks.
Yeah,
and he dropped it in, amongst 3 guys, and Marks kind of caught it, got pummeled, still hung on. I thought that was the most impressive offensive play of the night. Miller demonstrated tremendous touch, tremendous accuracy, and a lot of toughness from Woody Marks to be able to make that catch. So I think he just kind of took what the defense gave them. And this team is going to be a handful here through the air, on the ground, offensively, defensively. The building blocks are being constructed here to make a really deep run this season.
No, I wasn't saying that he was bad. I'm just saying, like, so certain plays, like, where the timing is slightly off, that's what's going to make them a lot better. Like the bender in the end zone, right? The timing is just a little bit off there. Once they start getting the timing down for those, automatic touchdowns consistently. Like, it's not
totally. The one thing I'll say, Coach, the one guy of all the guys that we love, you're the Lemon guy, I'm the Lane guy and all this stuff. And I hate to say this. I mean, it's paining me to say this. I don't know if Deuce Robinson should be playing football. Like he's a little, he's a little soft, and we've tried to kind of throw him the ball a few times. I just think he's Aaron Judge 2.0. I hope it sort of turns around, and he has a terrific season. It feels like maybe it should be baseball, but it's still early. And
I think they have to find plays for Deuce.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Once they find plays for Deuce and make him the big man, and I think he'd like back shoulder fades in the red zone, things like that. That would be his spot. But yeah, like I think that's what they're trying to do with that bender in the end zone. But that's all. I wasn't saying that Miller Moss had a bad night. I was just saying once they get those timing plays down, they're pretty much become unstoppable. Right, those little things like that, or like just like he underthrew Malachi Lemon on that post. It's fine. It's not the end of the world, but hey, maybe he just didn't judge his speed right. So let's lead him a little bit more. We got a touchdown. That's 6 all day. So those small little things, We go to the big house. We're winning 47-0. Easy.
He gave Michigan one more point than Utah State.
Yeah, definitely. You guys got anything else, or are you guys ready to bounce out of here?
Yeah, I just got two quick things, and then I'm good. Quickly on Marks, since Lincoln Riley's been here, I think he's hit home runs at running back in the transfer portal. When you look at Dye and Austin Jones, Marshawn Lloyd last year, Woody Marks might be the best of all of them. I mean, what he does in between the tackles in small windows, small creases that he can hit and explode. What we've already seen in the passing game, as you mentioned on that little wheel route, Jamal, that was a thing of beauty, and also in his I think in his pass pro, he's really, really good in pass protection. So Woody Marks, the sky's the limit. Quentin Joyner is going to be a star. Brian Jackson, the true freshman. I had him on my underdog fantasy lineup because he had a crazy multiplier, and they used him in the red zone on 2 drives and then decided to throw it in instead of let him run it in on like 3rd down. But and then Amarian Peterson as their 4th option. I mean, just they're loaded in the running back room. And, when you think Lincoln Riley, you always think passing attack, quarterback, Heisman, but this running back stable, you could make the argument as one of the best in college football if they can continue this up. And Woody Marks showing that size, speed, and power that people are accustomed to of SEC running backs coming from Michigan or Mississippi State. And I think he's just getting going, and what they're able to do with Anthony Jones as their coach, I think is really impressive. And then last point, this is why opening the season against a top opponent like LSU can be so defining and important, I think, for your season, because had they played 2 cupcake games like most teams and then go to the big house for week 3, we'd still have a lot of questions, and we still do. It's early, but because of that first game, having adversity, playing on a neutral site, having to have 2 back-to-back essentially game-winning drives when it mattered most, having your defense needing to get one final stop against a top opponent in the SEC, it really shows us, but also as a team, shows you they can do it against anyone. I mean, if you had played San Jose State and Utah State back-to-back, it's like, okay, cool. We beat lesser opponents, but what do we really match up against, top-tier talent? And you got to do it every week. You got to put the pads on every week and prepare every week. But I think starting off against LSU and getting that win is so instrumental moving forward, because it tells you a lot about your makeup of your team. And then now you just improve on the little things and watch the film and make sure schematically you're going up against another opponent. So I think it's great when you do have one of those. Obviously it can go the opposite way if they would have lost that game. But the fact they got the win, I think, really speaks volumes on what this team can do, instead of like last year starting off 6-0 and then, you get your first test and you kind of get punched in the mouth. Like now it's like, well, they got punched in the mouth week 1 and they came out unscathed and came out with the win. So I think that's big.
100%. Hey, Issa, we're congregating right now, man. Church is congregation. We're congregating over our Trojans. No, good deal. Hey, I appreciate you guys. Another victory Sunday in the books.
Coach, I'll just say one thing.
Go ahead. My bad. Go ahead.
I just think that the importance. I think Ryan brought up a really good point. This sport is played at such the margins, because just think about how important that first week was against LSU for all the reasons that Ryan described. But close game, and we come out on top, and now it propels us with all of this momentum, thinking big as we've thought in 15 years. But imagine had we lost that game, and that game came down to a few plays. Look at the state of Michigan right now. Look at Notre Dame right now. Like, if you lose that game, where does the signature win come from then? Like, look at sort of the situation with the schedule, right? We talked about, Coach, it doesn't matter whether we're 13 or 23, because you win that game, you're going to take that spot, and then you're in a great situation. Now you look at how some of these teams are playing out. Can you imagine kind of losing that game and then looking, even if you go to the big house, right, with the test, after what has happened to Michigan, there's a shine that's kind of been taken out of that game and moving forward. So football is just played at such the margins, where look at where we are, top 10, thinking big, thinking playoff, thinking Big Ten championship against Ohio State. Imagine a couple plays don't go our way. Like, look at what LSU looked like against Nicholas State. I mean, they looked total, they looked flat. They looked a little defeated. They looked a little sore. That loss took a lot out of them. And look at the state of kind of LSU's program in 2 weeks versus the state of ours. And so that's why these marquee games are so important, but you got to kind of win them, because otherwise it can kind of sidetrack you a little bit over the course of the season. But, so grateful that we're on the right side of it and so much to be excited about. Ryan, I think it's going to be a fun debate. I still think Marshawn Lloyd is the best running back that Lincoln has had, just given his tool set. But let's see how it all shakes out. That's going to be a fun debate over the course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
I think Marshawn Lloyd is third. I think it is Woody Marks, Travis Dye, then Marshawn Lloyd. Production-wise, let's just say production-wise.
Yeah, I mean, well, Woody Marks only played 2 games, so let's see. Production-wise, Woody Marks is third right now. So.
That is true. That's definitely. But we're predicting what we're forecasting for his production is going to be really good. So definitely we'll see. Hey guys, I appreciate you. I appreciate all of our fans for tuning in this morning. 212. We're starting off this season good. We're starting off the season great. You guys keep tuning in. Bye week. It's like we all the way back in spring again. We got to figure out some stuff to talk about for a week. We're right back at it. But hey, our guys get to get healthy, get to prepare for Michigan for 2 weeks. So definitely a good point. I appreciate you guys. I get to see you guys tomorrow. Hey, everybody, don't forget, if you want to learn about your Rams, Chargers, and the other teams across town and future coming, the Lakers and the Dodgers, go to LAFBnetwork.com. And if you're into fantasy football, go check out our guys Amar and Spencer Tad Desai on all your fantasy football picks and everything going down. That's LAFB.com. We're here again. Victory Sunday. Let's keep these Victory Sundays going. I prefer to have 12 Victory Sundays in a row, and that would be great. So let's get it going. Hey, you guys know how it goes. Live free. Fight on.
Enjoy NFL Sunday.